It's not the most promising setup that the godmind behind a critically acclaimed prog rock band ends up plumbing together a sleazy, funky pop album inspired by Black Mirror and sounding like the last Portugal the Man album. Except I doubt that I'll hear a single like Eminent Sleaze playing in a McDonald's toilet cubicle as often as Feel It Still did. Through the 90s and all the way past Y2K, the fancy-handed Steven Wilson was the leader of prog band Porcupine Tree, which sounds like a name that he came up with as a joke and then had to stick with. Melancholy casts a shadow over every album that Wilson casts away, where even if a soundscape is reminiscent of bright daylight, the soul at the centre of it is still overdue on its power bill, though there was a point where they were mainly channeling the long-form psych prog tendencies of legends before them like Pink Floyd. There was also a point where they started getting good too. I haven't even had a chance to properly talk about Pork Tree, so I'm keen. I'd actually say that it was around the turn of the new century when Pork Tree really started to hammer down on their most agreeable factors. The twinkling, harmonious wistfulness of Stupid Dream brings out some of their best bits, like when the songs get all pillowy for a second and Wilson records these beautiful vocal harmonies that pull you out of the grit for a moment before dunking you back in again. In Absentia is their darkest record, and Dead Wing has these brave marriages between the psyche proggy stuff and the dreamier, cleansing stuff that I'm more partial to. I tell you all of this because Steven Wilson's solo material, at least after the debut album where he names a track after Harmony Korine, is so much more sullen and meditative, as if to give you breathing space. Even during 2017's To The Bone, where he flirts with cheesy arena pop, there's room for you to think proper and aimlessly walk around, like when you step all over the furniture during a phone call. Unfortunately, while Wilson excels at producing and composing a decent musical experience, he gets ahead of himself in conceptualizing. Whatever concepts on To The Bone that there were, it does have lines about being tired of Facebook and hearing you fuck your girlfriend through the wall. Okay, buddy. It shatters the suspense like a rock melon through a car windshield, and unfortunately, on his new album The Future Bites, the habits haven't become any better tempered. In fact, they're wild and they've been let loose like my hair these past few months. It's the concept for me, satirizing the consumer world through its marketing campaign, a store branded by The Future Bites, selling sloganeering t-shirts and cans of air, hole punches and toilet paper rolls, probably the most by-the-numbers gag you could put into action regarding this topic. And I think that's emblematic of how behind the curve the satire on The Future Bites is. As far as sparkly funk and disco-inspired rock operas go, even Muse was onto this before. God forbid Mr. Wilson accidentally just created a spiritual successor to Simulation Theory. The usual booty-shaking pulse that you'd feel with a funk song like Self isn't there. The whole result is so cold and metallic with no soul, and I imagine that this is to capture how dead inside music becomes when it's reduced to mere industrial product, and I would accept this if the music itself didn't sound so uncharacteristically horridly produced for something that Steven Wilson created. Self wears this awful wardrobe of demonic vocal effects, the echo of yelling into a steel mailbox, and these metallic clangs that ring in your ears like distant banshee screams. It's a clumsy track that sounds barely awake, scruffy bedhead and eye crust galore, and yet somehow it isn't nearly as embarrassing as Eminent Sleaze, which grooves with the swagger of a school disco dad that still thinks Gangnam Style is in fashion.
I say something funny, you give me all your money, I flash up on TV, you hate your copies over.
There's at least some grin of a sense of humour during its pervy, invasive chorus, but it's punctured by the fact that the vocalist group singing it sounds like a choir of aunties. I get that it's meant to sound like a car insurance jingle, but fuck me, which I'm sure the narrator would be overjoyed to do. The brooding, daunting, especially spacious atmosphere of a Steven Wilson record is gone. If there's any album that deserves to sound like it has a dark heart at its core underneath the neon bright disco bukkake, then it should be this one, the one inspired by Charlie Brooker's Bedside Diary, but unfortunately that whole thing is gone, rendering even the tender ballads utterly lifeless, like a satsuma that's just had the juice punched out of it. On King Ghost, with even its aquatic haze, Wilson's falsetto sounds particularly painful over it, and the song barely sounds finished, making me feel like I've been drowned in the spit bucket from a wine tasting party. The album doesn't even occupy style consistently. The singles like Self, Eminent Sleaze, and Personal Shopper imply that this is a stab at futuristic disco rock, but 12 Things I Forgot suddenly turns towards some very normal adult contemporary rock, and Follower just sounds like this old Porcupine Tree demo. It's definitely on some bullshit when 12 Things I Forgot sounds like a less emotively potent version of Circles by Post Malone, which is the ultimate insult when somebody's satire of commercial fodder is less appealing than actually listening to the commercial fodder. I would expect something a little bit more forlorn and haunting from an album whose first single was named after Oliver Assayas's 2016 film Personal Shopper, a meditation on iconography and the timelessness of the virtual world. The Future Bites achieves none of these sharp observations, nor even panics you into a state of concern about the modern world. It's way too predictable for a twist of the knife like that. The only ghost that haunts this town is going to end up confused and then go listen to Peter Gabriel instead.